Welcome to a little video on the big Fenix update. I think the most exciting news is that we're aiming to release on either Tuesday or Wednesday. I know it's been a long time coming, and we'd really like to express our thanks for the patience you've shown. With today's video, I'll be going over the highlights of the update before digging into a few standout features to discuss in detail. So let's get started with the highlights, and we'll begin with items that are relevant to both MSFS 2020 and MSFS 2024. Now, the first and probably most anticipated item on this entire list would be the reworked landing dynamics. So we completely rebuilt the landing profile, and we did this based on data that we collected from over 800,000 real-world flights, and this covers every variant that we currently produce. With this, you should see the aircraft behave differently, but measurably more realistically. Next up is an all-axis fly-by-wire retune. That's both pitch and roll getting some attention, again on the basis of these new datasets shedding some light on aircraft response nuances that were previously unavailable to us. An important note is that our recommendation on your controller axis setup has been updated, so with this latest set of changes, we're now seeing best correlation with completely linear control axis. More information on this later. In conjunction with the fly-by-wire retune, we've also built in a subtle simulation of the control input damping dynamics, and we've applied a small theoretical custom map just to further enhance the hand flight of the aircraft, particularly on the roll axis. As a result of this, SDS is now no longer required and has been deprecated. The aircraft, in both simulators, has been upgraded to use Asobo's latest and greatest ground handling model. This required us to rework the rudder axis once again for better controllability, utilizing our new real-world datasets to further refine the accuracy. Again, this is now tuned around the linear control axis as a starting point, and we've faithfully recreated the input mapping and the damping of the real aircraft onto those control axes, so you should feel a marked improvement across all flight regimes. Baby Shark. The A319 with sharklets. We even built a special engine for this one because quite frankly it was just too cool not to. American, one of the very few operators that run these airframes, they have their sharklet A319s configured specifically for performance. That means it runs a hot rod version of the CFM56, the 5B7. This is only available on the A319 and A319 ACJ, but it does put out as much thrust as a standard A320 powering 5B4. Needless to say, this one packs a bit of a punch on the baby bus. This addition brings the total number of external engine model modules that we've produced to a total of 7. That's just for the CEO. Our IAE-equipped A319 sharklet is running V2524s as configured on the type's only real customer Avianca, and it's shared with its non-sharklet counterpart. Of course, the engines aside, it is a bespoke flight model for the sharklet-equipped A319 with the requisite subtle changes to lift and drag and a bunch of tiny other tweaks to fully realize the difference that the sharklets bring to the A319 airframe. We even managed to find not one, but 2 test pilots who regularly operate the type and have them sign off on the flight characteristics, as it can be quite sporty. Weather radar with gain control now available. So tilt is still not possible without additional changes to the core platform, but we have the system-side groundwork in place should it ever be made available to us. Next is the EFB. We've added stop margins to the takeoff performance. As mentioned in the blog post, it's kind of shoehorned into the UI at the moment, but it's there. We'll be revamping the entire UI for this page later, among some other improvements. Another new feature is the custom PDF viewer in the Pilot Briefing app, should you wish to read a magazine or import your own offline charts. We've also added the ability to adjust the volume of other Windows processes, so vPilot, GSX, or even Spotify, using the ACP volume knobs. And because Dave doesn't know how to take a holiday, he's gone and rebuilt the sounds again. Not just improved engine recordings, you're getting a completely new sound set for most things you hear often in the airplane. The packs in AEVC, for example. We went out on a special recording mission with an aircraft, wired up the flight deck and exterior with microphones, and captured an array of high-quality sounds over the course of a day. This will bring lots of little details, like the pack's tonality and pitch being tied into the heat demand that's requested of them, and the ambience in the flight deck changing as you move around the space in 3D. Building on the new sounds, we've also made a major breakthrough with the limitation of the MSFS sound engine. Previously, external sounds couldn't be attenuated based on your position within the aircraft relative to open doors or windows. But with some absolute wizardry from the team, we've overcome this limitation, and now we have a single, seamless, and dynamic sound set that calculates and applies occlusion, meaning nothing ever really sounds out of place as you float yourself through the cockpit door into the cabin with the L1 door open, and you'll hear the APU or the brake fans or whatever's going on outside too. This did require us though to go through all 3,000 plus samples on the aircraft and adjust for this system, but we think it's been thoroughly worth it. We've built this in 2024 and we've backported it to 2020, but it's even better in 2024 with the Walkaround Mode. More on that later. The displays have gotten a rework for color accuracy too. Thanks again to a recent reference trip allowing us to use calibrated color sampling technology to identify the exact tonality of the displays. Both the slightly older LCDs, as appropriate for your average CEO, and the revised backlighting on the 725s in the Neo. Surprisingly, there is quite some color variability, even between displays in the same flight deck. And finally, we have a few hundred bug fixes and changelog items besides all of these big ticket things. And that's only for the stuff that's applicable to both sims. Let's now do a rapid fire run through of all the 2024 specific stuff. The big one for 2024 is that the airplane has been rebuilt as a native 2024 modular sim object package. If you don't know what this means, that's okay, but it is a big deal, tantamount to building a whole new aircraft. The entire structure of the aircraft is different now, but it also has unlocked a ton of very cool possibilities, and it leaves us in a position to truly take full advantage of whatever is coming down the 2024 pipeline. As for the benefits to you now, the first isn't quite so flashy, but it is incredibly important. LODs. When doing the 2024 rebuild, we wanted to harness every square millimeter of improvement. So we pulled the model apart at the studs and we began the process of building out LODs. If you don't know what LODs are, it's a system where objects are made less complex the fewer pixels they occupy on screen. In theory, this reduces the amount of resources required to render a scene. A lot of you are familiar with how highly detailed the Fenix model is. That takes resources, and it's really important to us to make sure that we're squeezing out absolutely everything we can on the performance front. Now, with BFU in 2024, you won't be rendering the entire full-scale, full-detail model when you don't need to be. It's even let us cram more detail in, because we have the liberty to suppress that detail at distance or when it's not relevant. This was an enormous task, as it required us to build 4 or 5 variations of every single item we've modeled on this airplane in different levels of detail. Then set it all up so you don't notice it changing between detail levels when appropriate. Once again, you're familiar with how much detail we've tried to pack into our airplane, so going over it like this was quite an intense process, but we think it's netted out at quite a respectable result. We'll get into that later too. Because of these core improvements, we've started to take advantage of the Walkaround Mode and all the associated fun stuff to play with there. You saw the intro cinematic, doors, panels, maintenance bus, all sorts of stuff to mess with now, all with their logic represented as far as we can take it. And we plan on doing more in the future, so this is just considered the beginning to the external interactivity that you can expect. Given the lighting engine has changed between 2020 and 2024, we simply couldn't leave the flight deck in a state we did not intend, so the model was reworked and completely retextured to suit 2024's lighting and new materials. We've done a ton of work here, which we'll get into later on. This includes some other little ridiculous tidbits, such as all our 7-segment displays now being physically emulated. Given they aren't modern backlit LCD-based displays, there's a really unique look to them which we've taken quite some pains to correctly build. The net result is stunning when light cascades across the FCU. The highlights and shadows give it a superb sense of depth. This is an opt-in option, as the downside is a render situation with MSFS, causing a bit of ghosting when the FCU is scrolled on lower resolution screens, along with some memory handling issues with certain gauge surfaces in 2024. To try these out, just tick the option and it'll be switched on for you. All 750 plus liveries present on our livery manager, and about 50 new ones have been converted for the new native 2024 airplane. This includes the custom cabins that we've included in several of the liveries. The EFB sees some much requested improvements that are native to 2024. Lido charts are available, for example, in both day and night versions, and we also now support using the EFB within MSFS's native EFB app if that's something you wish to do. Especially useful during a walkaround if you wish to have access to the EFB without running back up the stairs every single time. So, the airplane now looks different, sounds different, flies different, and the systems and avionics are one step on from where we left them. Now those are the headlines. The rest of this is dry and boring. There's your warning. Let's dive right into it. Let's begin by talking about the art side. So, something that became apparent pretty much from the first release of 2024, and that was something I think quite a lot of you have noticed also. It's how different the flight deck artwork is rendering between both the sims. Our 2020 art has been quite extensively customized and refined specifically for 2020's graphics engine. And as a result of that, what we found were many of the customizations and tweaks that we'd made to improve the visual quality in 2020, they were inversely harming the experience in 2024. It seems like quite an obvious choice, but rather than port across what we had with the tweaks, we basically again decided to start from the ground up and do the same as we did for 2020 and build specifically for the 2024 graphics engine in mind. We were extra lucky to have just returned from a reference trip around this time though, and what we got to do was scan a more representative airframe for our current CEO configuration. We even brought along a bunch of new tech that let us capture exact color information from the panels and even the displays themselves. And it was actually during this reference trip that we spent quite a while just looking at the various front-lit 7-segment displays that are present across the flight deck. So stuff like the FCU and the radio panels. Now the big challenge with this display type is that it's very unlike your phone or your LCD monitor. So here the digits get brighter when light shines on them. So sunlight pouring in through the window will actually increase the contrast on these displays. But in MSFS, the gauge surface responds much more like a typical LCD, and it'll actually lose contrast in these scenarios. To work around this, we started by physically modeling the separate layers of the physical item itself, and then its respective surface properties. And then we built up the way that light propagates through both the front and the back, and how all these various light sources may impact the displays. We're really happy with how it looks, but like I said before, there is a catch. FS 2024 relies very heavily on temporal rendering, and this can cause a bunch of ghosting when you have certain settings or display resolutions. It's for this reason it's entirely opt-in via a setting in the EFB, but we're pretty hopeful as 2024 matures, this can be improved in the graphics engine. With this reference trip, we were also able to greatly improve our LCD panel simulation, especially utilizing the new rendering possibilities in FS 2024, with more clarity and consistency between the displays, subtle viewing angle color degradation, and better reflections. There's more to come on this, but it's a major step up from our previous iteration. From the moment the new Walkaround mode in FS 2024 was previewed, the art team were immediately off building refueling panels and hydraulic access hatches, and the systems team got hard at work supplementing these panels with the behind-the-scenes logic. Funnily enough, we'd actually spec'd out all of this back in June 2022 as an art and systems upgrade that we could somehow implement in the future. However, we all agreed it was a bit of a letdown that you couldn't actually walk on board the aircraft. As it stands, Walkaround mode in FS 2024 starts and ends outside of the aircraft, but with so much potential for additional interaction items in the cabins and the galleys, and the thought of a truly seamless experience from the captain's seat to the chocks, we figured that there must be something we could do. And after some significant effort and out-of-the-box thinking, we finally had something that worked. Now, it wasn't perfect, and it still isn't. The core system was never designed to do what we've done, but on balance, we feel like the experience is pretty transformative, and any of the inherent shortcomings pale in comparison to the immersion of actually walking around your entire aircraft, inside and out. Let's begin talking about Walkaround from the flight deck. You can now stand up by pressing your keybind for avatar mode, or by clicking on the high visibility jacket that's hanging up behind you. Once you've stood up, you're free to walk around the airplane, and that includes operating the doors from inside and out. So, opening it is simple. From the inside, all you have to do is disarm it and pull the giant red lever up, and finally swing the door outwards. As you can see from the demo too, we've actually taken a bit of time to ensure that the door feels really quite heavy and damped, like it's got some weight and inertia to it. You can do the same from the outside in. It's a similar enough process, so just read the instructions on the door and do what's logical. So if you click on the handle, it sticks your hand through the door, and then you pull the lever upwards, and then you just pull the door open. So remember that there is a gust lock on the door, so make sure you lock the door open when you're trying to open it, so open it to full extension, and consequently when you're trying to close it, don't forget to click the unlock button before trying to pull the door closed, otherwise it will just stay locked open. You'll notice as well as the door opens and closes and we step in and out that the sound was changing smoothly. Now, this isn't a native MSFS audio engine function. This was actually something we had to engineer internally. I'm not going to bore you with specifics, but safe to say it was a ton of work, and David even went so far as to add footstep sounds that'll vary with the weather. We've even included stuff like the switch that controls the maintenance bus. This is accessible from a small switch on the ceiling of the forward galley, and in order to accommodate it, we had to rewire portions of the electrical system. This is meant for use when the aircraft is plugged into ground power and it's in a cold and dark state. This isn't just a light switch, although the galley and passenger compartment lighting does come on. It also powers several other items like the yellow hydraulic pump so that the cargo doors are operable, the cargo hold lighting, the fuel quantity indicators, the refueling panel, the navigation lights, and ground call via the AC and DC flight buses. It basically energizes various parts of the aircraft commonly needed by ground personnel without requiring a full flight deck and avionics power-up. It's a bypass in a sense. Now, the maintenance bus, as I mentioned, is supplied from ground power, so should you yoink the ground power, this switch is going to be forced into the off position, and it does this via a little bit of electromagnetic magicry. This then obviously depowers everything that we spoke about. Before we go even deeper, I do want to specifically mention that a lot of our work for this update has been in laying the groundwork for future ideas and features. So we aren't even fully utilizing the new technology that we've built here. Namely, we're missing interactions and visual items that we think would make the walk-around process a lot more dynamic and enjoyable. But keep an eye on future updates, as we will no doubt be adding to this aspect of the product going forwards. Anyhow, moving on to the cargo doors. The bulk cargo door is a customer option, but where fitted, it is now possible to manually operate. I will warn you though, this is not the most intuitive design in the world, and several of our testers were again reminded that Airbus print the instructions on the door for a good reason, and we have done our best to transpose the relatively complex mechanism in a somewhat sensible way. If we talk about the main cargo doors, as you'd expect, these are fully hooked up to the hydraulic simulation, and the lights are hooked up to the correct electrical source, which is why they're available via the main bus. There are, however, a couple of interesting things about these cargo doors. To get into them, you push into the flap to get purchase on the handle, but once you pull it unlocked, the door will actually fall ajar. So this is its natural resting position when it's left fully unpowered. Once you actuate the cargo door selector switch, that's when you start the yellow hydraulic pump, which you'll hear go off, and it's followed by the door starting to move. You'll note though, whenever we stop door movement, the yellow electrical pump continues to run for 10 seconds. Don't send in a bug report about this, it's not a bug, this is just following the logic on the real aircraft. Anyway, actuating the switch is a click and hold, so if you let go of the switch, the door will stop movement midway through, which leads to important note number 2. When you're opening the door, it has to lock up. If you stop the open action before it reaches maximum extension and therefore lock, once the pump stops running, it will very slowly fall back down again as the struts lose pressure over time. It's similar for closing. If you're closing the door, it will only stay in its frame for so long without being locked in. So make sure you hustle over to the handle quickly and lock it closed. Next we come to the refueling panel. Now, we've modeled all of the functions that are present on the refueling panel, and you can do pretty much everything with it. So, of course, your basic refueling, but then you can also do transfers and defuels. Even the internal power logic is emulated. So if you're only on battery power, for example, it will take about 40 seconds before you get the displays, because the fuel quantity indicators, they need to wake up and they have to go through their initialization process before they give us an output. On a basic valve level, as soon as you open the refueling panel, the intercell transfer valves that sit between the inner and outer tanks, those are commanded to close. And when you start shifting fuel around using the procedures, you'll even notice that left to right and right to left are a little bit different. So there's a lot of little interesting aspects to get into here. This thing really should come with its own operating manual that flops out whenever you open the access panel, but suffice to say, for those of you that want to mess with it, we've done our best to capture all the behaviors and quirks of the real thing. Now, of course, the automatic refueling modes all work as expected, but if you do prefer messing with stuff, like I said, manual refueling mode is available to you and you can actuate each valve individually. Although there's no defueling truck model, you can use the defuel function by leaving the refuel valves in normal, moving the mode selector to the defuel/transfer position, and lastly turning on the fuel pumps in the tanks you wish to defuel to on. If you use the EFB or GSX to refuel, the panel will still open and close accordingly, and all of the fuel that's taken on board the aircraft now actually arrives via this new refueling system that's tied into the panel. So if there are any circuit breakers that are pulled or faulty electrical systems, these valves may not actually open and close, and these side effects are therefore present regardless of whether you're manually using the refueling panel, EFB, or GSX. Users in 2020 will also benefit from this refueling system upgrade, just without the walkaround or interactive panel ability, but we are going to try and investigate some sort of solution here. Just be aware it's a bit of a low priority item for the moment. Onward to the gear, and this is where we got a little bit carried away. So there's a crazy amount of detail in the gear bays. We have never really had an effective way of showing this off before, so naturally, given the fact that there happen to be 2 hydraulic access panels that one can open, and inside of which is a handle for each door that happens to gravity drop said door, it was kind of a no-brainer. So yeah, you can do that now, and we feel like it is a thorough justification for Tom's madness when it came to modeling all of the wires, hoses, and pipes in there. Now, closing it is a bit of an important one. You'll probably want to know this. You'll need a bit of hydraulic power for that, so make sure you've got the yellow electrical pump running and then just stow or return the gear door handles to their original positions, and the gear door should just scoot on up. Lastly, we've integrated the external power panel. So if you click the socket, we hook up ground power. Everything on this panel is then functional. Lights and switches, the APU cutoff, Even cockpit call will work if external power is selected on in the flight deck. Just another touch point for you to interact with the aircraft systems modeling. Okay, let's move to a different area for a moment. Now, when we started scoping our walkaround mode internally, we got together on a call and started talking about what we wanted to do and how we wanted to do it. And we got a very quick picture of how childish we all were, because the only unanimous decision that entire call was that somehow you had to be able to spin the fan blades. And because we're children, you can now spin the fan blades. So if you grab the spinner, you can slow the windmilling rotation down, and then you can manually drag the fan to inspect each blade. The fan blades on the CFM56 are designed with a certain amount of radial clearance in their root mounting slots. This is for thermal expansion, and at low rotation speeds such as windmilling or moving them by hand, you'll hear anything from clicking to clattering as they fall within the gap of the mounting slot. This goes away at higher speeds as centrifugal force pushes them outward even against the forces of gravity. But even then, there's quite a bit of weight to the entire mechanism, so don't expect to move it particularly easily. And, more to the point, please remember, when you're stood in front of the engine, and I mean stood in front of the engine, there is only a small section that you can reach with your hands. And that's namely the lower middle section. And this is where the click spot for the fan blades are. Now let's talk a little bit about some of the limitations and shortcomings that we're currently unable to address with this system. So first of all, the camera clipping plane is a little bit short. So if you get too close to an object, you'll be able to see straight through it. The character can sometimes also teleport to the ground when you're transitioning between collision meshes. There are also a few issues with the core MSFS systems not really initializing in walkaround mode for the first time, so sometimes lights may not work until you've sat in the flight deck once. Speaking of sitting in the flight deck, to leave walkaround mode, you can either put your high-vis jacket back by clicking on the hanger, or you can click on the captain seat. Oh, look, I think that covers enough headline material for now. We don't really want to build a feature-length update film, but rest assured, a changelog will be available with the launch for those of you who are looking for the systems and avionics improvements. We have made plenty of those all over the aircraft, so there should be hopefully something for absolutely everybody as part of this update. A small final word. I really do hope from the work that we are putting out here that we are showing a commitment to the product and to maintain it to be the best standard possible. We have now passed 3 years on the market, and the only reason we're able to reinvest in the product like this is because people continue to recommend and purchase the product. So we just wanted to say thank you for this. We don't really do any marketing besides these videos and our blog, so the constant support is always wonderful. I also hope you see that this is pretty much only the start. Even for owners of the CEO that don't plan on buying our Neos, we're going to keep you right alongside with the infrastructure and system bug fixes and improvements that are relevant to the CEO product line. We did not want to hold any of these nice features exclusively for our soon-coming latest shiny product. It may not help make a more compelling case for the Neos, but we prefer that the product speaks for itself in a sense. That's just kind of the way we do things. So with that, I'll leave you there. Thanks for hanging in this long. It's been a bit of a dry one, but I don't think I've ever not said that at the end of one of these things. We are going to crack back on with work and keep our heads down as usual. Thank you very much for listening, and we will very closely be assessing the launch and response for anything we can tweak to improve. Thank you.
So now we get to the bit where he said in the email, put the changelog at the end of the video. But he hasn't really elaborated on that, and he's not answering his phone. This needs to be uploaded in about an hour and a half, so here's the Dave version of the changelog, I guess.